Esther, host of Once Upon a Crime. This month, for October, I'm sharing true crime cases in which musical artists' lives were tragically cut short as a result of homicides. In 1993, Mia Zapata, a rising star in the genre of punk rock music, joined what is morbidly referred to as the 27 Club, artists and celebrities whose lives ended at the age of 27. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, and Amy Winehouse all qualify. But like other members of this unfortunate club, Mia Zapata didn't die as the result of a drug overdose or by her own hand. She was murdered on the streets of Seattle just before she reached the pinnacles of success with her band, the Gits. In this episode, I'll detail the life, death, and lasting legacy of Mia Zapata, a promising young musician. Mia Zapata was a study in contrasts. She was both an introvert and an extrovert. She loved to sit for hours inside her own imagination, writing in her journals and creating poetry and art. She also loved to get wild with her friends, dancing, singing, and laughing until all hours of the morning. Mia possessed a deep empathy for others, which sometimes caused her to become severely depressed. She enjoyed traveling and meeting new people, and outwardly seemed fearless. But internally, she could lack self-confidence and cast a wary eye when faced with new environments, places, and people. Everyone seemed to know Mia. She was easily recognizable with her petite frame, cropped blonde hair, sometimes grown into dreadlocks, fashionably ripped clothing that she sometimes painted graffiti designs on, impish face, and childlike smile. Mia naturally drew people to her, whether they were preppy college students, business proprietors, kids from the punk rock community, or people who lived on the fringes of society, street people, sex workers, and the mentally ill. But she only kept a handful of people close. These friends served as Mia's second family, her support system, and her confidants. The energy Mia possessed that made her magnetic was evident from an early age. Mia Catherine Zapata was born in Chicago, Illinois on August 25, 1965. She was the youngest of Richard and Donna Zapata's 3 children. Mia and her siblings, Eric and Kristen, were raised in Louisville, Kentucky. The family moved there in 1974, when their father took a job at WDRB-TV. Donna Zapata was hired at another television station in Louisville a year later, and would become the station manager. Richard and Donna separated shortly after arriving in Louisville. Richard relocated to Washington State. Mia was interested in music and art. Her creativity was evident from the time she entered preschool. Her teachers described her as a most imaginative child who'd often go off on her own to draw. She would make up poems and song lyrics on the spot and learn to play the guitar and piano by age 9. However, early in her school years, Mia had trouble reading and writing due to dyslexia. Still, she expressed herself in words, writing poetry, and jotting down her thoughts, feelings, and ideas in a journal all her life. Donna Zapata described the differences between her 3 children, saying that Eric was cool, Kristen was preppy, and Mia was arty. Eric would become a hairstylist to the stars in Hollywood, owning a salon that catered to celebrity clients. Kristen would fulfill her dreams to attend college, get married, and raise a family. Mia would enroll at a liberal arts college to pursue poetry and painting. Mia stood out from her peers, always setting herself apart as unique. She attended Presentation Academy, a prep school, but she took to wearing an army jacket over her school uniform, a clear violation of the rules. Mia, always a nonconformist, didn't care about fitting in or what people thought about her look. She was comfortable in her own skin and didn't seek outside approval from others. She expressed her creativity in several ways: drawing and painting, writing poetry, and through music. From an early age, Mia loved all genres of music: jazz, blues, rock, and punk. She was drawn to female singers like Janis Joplin, Billie Holiday, Patti Smith, and Nina Simone. Even as a child, Mia had a husky voice, which lent itself well to the blues rock ballads she loved to listen to and sing. Mia's father, Robert Zapata, was proud of his Mexican roots and regaled his children with tales of Mexican revolutionary leader Emiliano Zapata, whom he said was a distant relative. Mia was intrigued enough by these stories to paint the likenesses of Emiliano and his brother Eufemio Zapata on a large canvas in 1985. When it was time to apply to colleges, Mia worried about her struggles with reading. However, the dean of Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, told her that the school's small class sizes and freedom students had to design their own curriculum would be a perfect fit for her. Mia agreed and enrolled in the fall of 1984. Antioch College was a small liberal arts school with a diverse student body. Self-expression and nonconformity were celebrated at Antioch. Students were allowed to plan their individual fields of study to some degree, and were required to complete internships off campus as part of their coursework, rather than sitting in classrooms all semester. For all these reasons, the school was an oasis for artists, writers, and musicians. Mia found a safe space at Antioch where she could be herself. She was inspired to paint and write poetry. She also made friends with other students and the people she met off campus in local bars and clubs that catered to live music. At a bar in town frequented by Antioch students, Mia met Steve Moriarty, Andy Kessler, and Matt Dresner. Steve was a musician from Indianapolis who'd taken piano lessons since the age of 6, but found his passion as a drummer. He studied jazz drumming beginning at age 10 and won several competitions. Andy Kessler, nicknamed Joe Spleen, was a trained jazz guitarist from Brooklyn. Matt Dresner, who hailed from New Jersey, was an artist who aspired to attend the Rhode Island School of Design. One night, Matt was attending an open mic night at the bar and heard Mia sing. He was so excited upon hearing her voice that he immediately told her they had to start a band with Mia as the lead singer. He made this pronouncement even though he'd never played an instrument. He soon taught himself bass guitar toward the school. In November 1985, the punk band The Dead Kennedys traveled to Antioch College from their hometown of San Francisco to play a show. Steve was recruited to help build the stage. He had never heard a punk band before. Still, he was immediately inspired by the frenetic energy of the music and the rebellious lyrics that encouraged listeners to reject the status quo. Steve soon formed a punk band called Big Brown House with other Antioch students. Matt also became a punk rock fan and dedicated himself even more to mastering bass guitar. He started a band called White Picket Fence with Andy Kessler, who lived across the hall, on guitar. They recruited another student, Bob Lee, to play drums. Mia, of course, was invited to be their lead singer. Mia was the unifying force between the two bands. She and Steve had become fast friends since the first night they met in the bar. They listened to and discussed music for hours. Soon after Bob Lee left as White Picket Fence's drummer, the two bands joined together, with Steve as their new drummer. They performed together at college events, house parties, bars, high school dances, and anywhere else they could. They first named the band the Sniveling Little Rat-Faced Gits, a phrase from the line of a Monty Python skit, but this was eventually shortened to the Gits. The Gits didn't consider themselves a typical punk rock band. Their songs contained lyrics rebelling against authority, which was pure punk, but their songs were more melodic. Mia, Steve, and Andy's former experience playing classical, jazz, and blues wound its way into their songs, giving the Gits a new and unique sound for a punk band. Mia's deep, throaty voice was suited to blues rock ballads, but there was also power in her delivery, and she possessed a fiery stage presence. All these elements came together and wowed audiences who became loyal fans of Mia and the Gits. Mia and Andy spent hours together crafting lyrics for their songs. The group found an abandoned building on campus that they turned into a practice studio. They spent every minute not studying or working, writing new music and practicing. They began recording and duplicating their songs on cassettes they'd sell at their shows to help fund the band. They also created merchandise in the form of homemade t-shirts for additional revenue and to promote the band. The Gits played shows in Columbus, Dayton, and Cincinnati, Ohio, wherever they could wangle an invitation. Bowling alleys, live radio shows, birthday parties, and dances, to name a few. They also opened for other bands playing at the college and in town. Mia loved to sing, but performing in front of others initially set her nerves on edge. An introvert by nature, she increased her drinking for liquid courage, which allowed her to cut loose in front of an audience. But alcohol had always been an issue for Mia, and performing in bars and at parties where alcohol flowed freely did not help. While creatively, Mia was more prolific than ever, completing several paintings and writing dozens of poems and songs. She struggled in her classes. Mia was flunking out of a school that didn't assign grades. Something had to give. Her father, Richard, now living in Portland, Oregon, pressured Mia to get help. He kept offering to send for her to attend rehab in Portland. She was finally convinced when the band took a forced break from performing. Steve and Andy were away completing their final internships before graduation. Mia left in the middle of her junior year and checked into a rehab facility in Portland. When she returned weeks later, she was sober. The guys had graduated and now held a meeting to discuss if they were ready to commit to the band 100%. They all agreed that turning the Gits into a success was what they wanted, and they were willing to do whatever it took to realize that goal. They decided that their best shot would be to move somewhere where an independent band could gain some traction to be discovered. They packed up and moved across the country to the West Coast. In San Francisco, they met other bands, some of whom were already breaking into the music business. They were told Seattle had a thriving music scene, and it was cheaper to live there than in San Francisco. So Mia, Andy, Steve, and Matt packed up their van once more and headed to the Pacific Northwest. Upon arriving in Seattle in the summer of 1989, the band looked for an affordable rental to live, practice, and record their music in. They found an older house in a somewhat seedy neighborhood. They would name their new digs in the Capitol Hill district of Seattle the Rat House. They started setting up gigs immediately, playing small dive bars and other venues that hired bands to draw in customers. The Rat House soon became a known hangout for local youth, other musicians, and fans. The Gits became friends with several other bands in the area who used the Rat House as a recording space. Always entrepreneurial, they launched their own label, Rat House Records, and released a compilation album with other punk bands called Bobbing for Pavement. Enough money was raised to press 1,000 vinyl records, which sold out in a month. Bobbing for Pavement is highly collectible today. Mia and the guys took jobs to help pay the bills. Steve worked in clubs and used his contacts to book the band regularly. Mia waited tables in restaurants and served drinks in bars. She befriended several locals and was a magnet for those who were down on their luck, the homeless, the mentally ill, and those who were addicted to drugs and alcohol. She said she'd always aspired to work with the mentally ill, calling them my people. Mia treated everyone with the same kindness and respect regardless of their circumstances. She felt she could relate to their struggles, not fitting into conventional society and being challenged with substance abuse. Mia's deep empathy was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it helped her tap into deep emotions, both her own and those of others, which resulted in her ability to write powerful lyrics. It helped her connect to her audience in an authentic way. On the other hand, connecting with the pain of others took an emotional toll on Mia, sometimes causing her to become depressed. She wanted to help everyone who was hurting, but it took a lot out of her emotionally. She numbed her pain with alcohol, which caused her to fall into deeper melancholy. She'd eventually bounce back, especially when she was singing. Mia needed the music to get her out of her funk and return her to the endlessly hopeful, highly energetic person she was at her core. She entered into a long-term relationship with a Vietnam veteran named Robert, who was several years older than her. They met at a show and were soon inseparable. Robert experienced severe PTSD as a result of his military service, and Mia did her best to help him with his depression and anxiety. However, they often drank heavily when together, resulting in a tumultuous relationship. Mia wrote the song Another Shot of Whiskey with Robert in mind. The Gits earned a reputation as a great local band. They had a loyal following and were respected by other artists. However, their reputation had yet to be measured monetarily. They barely made enough to pay their bills, and it was difficult to scrape together the funds to travel to gigs in other cities. They'd already conquered Seattle, playing venues like the Frontier Room, the Vogue, and Skid Row, with other up-and-coming bands. Seattle had become a mecca for independent bands looking to be discovered. It was where Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden were discovered. The Gits played small gigs with all these bands who went on to be signed with major record labels while they continued to struggle. But financial success was not what the Gits was after. They believed that money ruined the purity and spirit of the music. They were more interested in a grassroots approach, reaching an audience looking for something new, different, and raw, and building a fan base that resonated with their songs. They were honest with themselves that their music was not suited for commercial radio. Their messaging was too in your face, and Mia cursed at will in their songs. Their sound was also different from what was being aired on commercial radio, even by grunge and alternative bands. The Gits music included influences from genres other than rock and punk, incorporating jazz, blues, African beats, classical guitar, and samba. There was also the challenge of being accepted as a punk rock band with a female lead singer. Many punk rock and grunge music fans were males who gravitated towards the Kurt Cobains and Eddie Vedders of the world. The Gits became friends with an all-female punk band, 7 Year Bitch. The band, comprised of Celine Vigil on vocals, Stephanie Sargent on guitar, Elizabeth Davis on bass, and Valerie Agnew on drums, were fans of the Gits before they became their friends. The Gits drummer Steve Moriarty became Valerie Agnew's boyfriend and taught her to play, and Matt dated guitarist Stephanie. 7 Year Bitch played their first gig as an opening act for the Gits. In January 1990, the Gits played for their largest audience ever. They were billed alongside Tad and Nirvana for a show at the University of Washington, where they performed in front of over 2,000 people. Nirvana had just signed with the independent record label Sub Pop and released their first album, Bleach. They were not yet the grunge music phenomenon they would become, but they were on their way. Between 1990 and 1991, the Gits released several well-received singles on independent labels, including Another Shot of Whiskey, Second Skin, and Precious Blood. They went on tour, traveling up and down the West Coast, playing venues in Portland, Olympia, Tacoma, Vancouver, Washington, Sacramento, San Jose, and San Francisco. They traveled as far as New Mexico and Arizona. They were billed with several bands that went on to have commercial success in rock, grunge, and punk music, including Hole, Alice in Chains, Everclear, Beck, The Flaming Lips, and Bikini Kill. Drummer Steve reconnected with people he'd met while traveling in Europe during college. They offered to host the Gits and set up a European tour of 12 cities in the fall of 1991. The Gits performed 16 shows in 6 weeks, from Amsterdam to Oslo. They were favorably received, and surprised to learn that they had fans in Europe before they even arrived. They met bands from Germany, Holland, and Norway, who became friends and supporters. The band Dead Moon from Portland had become an underground rock phenomenon in Europe with thousands of fans. They became friends and fans of the Gits and invited them to tour Europe as their opening act when they returned the following year. The band was excited about this offer, as it meant they'd be performing in front of thousands of fans on each leg of the tour. It could not have come at a better time. The band members were often broke and struggling to pay the rent. They'd been a working band for 5 years and had yet to release a record other than independently. They were frustrated and began to feel that they weren't given the same opportunities other less experienced bands received, although they believed they'd more than earned it. In an interview with a music journalist, Mia expressed this frustration. Quote, "I don't think people take music as seriously as we do. We work real hard at what we do, and we don't play simple music. We put thought and time and heart into every word, every chord, and we want people to feel connected to us, their friends, and themselves." Meanwhile, their friend 7 Year Bitch had been signed to a 3-album deal with a major record label and were set to tour with the Red Hot Chili Peppers and open for the bands Rage and Pearl Jam. The Gits were happy for their success, but wondered why they'd been passed over for similar recognition. One thought I have is that while 7 Year Bitch was a good band with talented musicians, because it was an all-female band, it was more marketable and likely to gain attention, the same way bands like the Runaways and the Go-Go's had been before them. Now feeling the excitement of their upcoming European tour, the Gits set out to write and record a demo tape. They booked time at a recording studio hiring Steve Fisk as the producer. Fisk had produced records for Nirvana and the Screaming Trees. They duplicated the completed demo on cassettes, sending them out to a dozen labels like Sub Pop, Frontier Records, Epitaph Records, and CZ. They waited for a response, but none came. It wasn't until later that they learned the tapes had not been duplicated correctly. They'd sent out dozens of blank cassettes. In 1992, the Gits band members raised funds to release an album independently. Titled Frenching the Bully, it contained 12 songs, including Second Skin and Another Shot of Whiskey. They enlisted a small Seattle label, CZ Records, to distribute it. While they were still without a record contract after 5 years as a band, the Gits had built a loyal fan base and received positive reviews in some of the most well-known and influential music publications: Spin Magazine, Rolling Stone, The New York Times, and The Village Voice. By 1992, even established artists were fans of the Gits. While playing a venue in San Francisco, Metallica, one of that day's most popular metal bands, came to a performance. Matt had no idea who these long-haired hard rockers were, and said, "Hey, thanks," like he would to any other fan. He had to be told that Metallica sold out stadiums worldwide and had just played before 1.6 million fans for one show in Moscow. The Gits played with several other established bands at the OK Hotel in Seattle, where Steve was employed. The OK Hotel was an all-ages punk venue that booked new and established acts. In 1992, the bands booked there included Babes in Toyland, Brian Jonestown Massacre, Neurosis, Agent Orange, DOA, Toad the Wet Sprocket, Sublime, and Green Day. Nirvana played a show at the OK in 1991 to earn enough gas money to travel to LA to lay down tracks for their 1992 album Nevermind. Within weeks, it would reach #1 on the US Billboard 200 chart and launch Nirvana's career as the hottest grunge band on the planet. Agents and record producers started flocking to the OK, hoping to sign the next band to become a phenomenon. 7 Year Bitch, the band inspired by the Gits, and whom they called friends, had been signed to a 3-album deal with a major label. They played at sold-out stadiums, opening for bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Rage, and Pearl Jam. They returned to Seattle in the summer of 1992 as a band that had made it to the top. On June 27, 1992, Valerie, the drummer with 7 Year Bitch, who by then had ended her relationship with Steve, called him sobbing. The band's guitarist, Stephanie Sargent, was being rushed to the hospital. Mia and Steve arrived in time to see her being loaded into an ambulance. Stephanie had passed out after drinking and doing a small amount of heroin the night before. She choked on her vomit and was dead at the age of 24. Mia was devastated at the loss of her friend and started to unravel. She grew depressed and started drinking heavily. Her relationship with Robert grew even more strained, and they split up. After the breakup of her long-term relationship, Mia isolated herself even further, spending her days drinking in bars and missing practices. When she did show up for scheduled gigs, her voice was shot and she was often drunk. The band was working on recording the album, but Mia was in bad shape, so they laid down 13 tracks without vocals until she could pull herself together. They were scheduled for another West Coast tour, but Mia was late for shows and forgot the lyrics mid-song. They decided they couldn't tour until she got help. All the guys expressed concern for her at a scheduled practice time and told her their decision. Mia tearfully agreed to sober up. They had big plans in the works. The album was coming together, and they were scheduled to leave on tour in June, return to Seattle for a short break, and then embark on their European tour with Deadboon in the fall. Knowing the band was counting on her, Mia significantly cut back, but didn't stop drinking. Still, her voice grew stronger, she was healthier, and ready to go on the road. Mia loved being on the road with the band. When she was with them, it felt like home. She was happy and felt protected. She loved to sing, and their fans were a source of inspiration, joy, and motivation for her. Performing also gave her the emotional release she needed in a safe space where she could express herself freely. On June 12, 1993, the Gits began their 3-week tour starting in Portland. They would play venues in San Francisco, Sacramento, San Jose, Los Angeles, and San Diego. Mia had been privately working on a solo set. During the tour, she was asked to perform alone, accompanied by Matt on an acoustic guitar at an after-hours show in San Francisco. It was the most intimate and personal performance she'd ever done. She was proud of it and surprised when the manager handed her $150 as payment. She tried to share it with the band, but they told her it was her money. She had earned it alone. They were proud of her too. When they landed in Los Angeles, the band was approached by a representative from Atlantic Records, who offered to take them out to lunch and talk business. They were initially nervous, not understanding that the rep would be footing the bill for the fancy Sunset Boulevard restaurant. Mia excused herself from the table to call her dad, who explained that she could order anything she wanted. The record label would be paying. She thought she'd died and gone to heaven. The rep was serious about signing the Gits. It had finally happened. They couldn't believe it and wondered if they were dreaming. But they'd always known their talent, hard work, and dedication would eventually pay off, and they were excited about their future. But first, they had to make sure their interests would be protected. Their music was the most important and the only thing that mattered to them. They met with one of the top music attorneys in Los Angeles, Rosemary Carroll, to seek her advice. Before leaving Los Angeles, they hired her as their legal counsel for the anticipated record deal. The band was on the verge of making all their dreams come true after years of playing dive bars, traveling the country in a drafty van, and sleeping in flea-bag motels. But it had all been worth it. Not only had they had a blast making music and performing together, but soon they would be considered a success by industry standards, performing for thousands on a European tour, signing a record contract, and no longer having to struggle to pay the rent. They returned home, stopping in Portland on July 1st, to play a show with Everclear and Dead Moon. Their last gig in Eastern Washington turned out to be an all-ages show at a moose lodge. But it didn't matter. Whether the Gits were playing in front of hundreds alongside top-billed bands or a few dozen kids, they gave 100% of their energy to put on the very best show possible. On the 4th of July, they returned to Seattle. On the way home, Mia confided to Steve that she'd always wanted to record a solo or acoustic album. But she was concerned that the guys might be mad. He assured her it was a great idea and promised they'd all help and support her no matter what. When Mia was dropped off at her place, she turned to him and said, "I don't feel right returning to Seattle. I wish we could just keep going, just the four of us. Just keep driving the hell out of Seattle." Steve reminded her that it was only for 2 days. They'd be back on the road together, traveling to New York City on July 7th, before flying to Europe to begin the tour. "Yeah, you're right," Mia smiled tiredly. "I can do 2 days. I'm ready to finish singing in the studio, finish the album, and get back on the road." They parted ways, tired but happy. Mia's first night out since returning to Seattle was on July 6th, the day before they were set to leave for New York. She met friends at the Comet Tavern and hung out there for a while. She also stopped at the pizza restaurant where she'd worked washing dishes. Finally, she visited a friend's apartment in Seattle's Central District, leaving around 2 a.m. At 3:30 a.m. on July 7th, Mia Zapata's body was found on the street near the intersection of 24th Avenue South and South Washington Street. She'd been beaten, raped, and strangled. The cord from her black hooded Gits sweatshirt was used to strangle her. She was wearing a pair of denim shorts and black boots. She had no identification with her. Her body was taken to the morgue, where the medical examiner recognized her. He was a fan of the Gits and had seen Mia perform. She'd been beaten so severely that the ME determined she would have likely died from internal injuries if she hadn't been strangled. She'd suffered a blunt impact to her abdomen and a lacerated liver. There was evidence that Mia had attempted to fight off her attacker. Everyone who knew and loved Mia was devastated at her loss. The Seattle music community came together to try and find her killer. Posters were pasted all over the city, and radio shows and television news programs asked for anyone who might know something to call in a tip to Seattle police. But very few viable leads came in, and the case soon went cold. The band, Mia's family, and her fans raised money through benefit concerts in Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco to hire a private investigator. Over $70,000 was raised, and the PI worked on the case for 3 years, but with no luck. Mia's killer remained unidentified. Theories were floated about her murder. It appeared she'd been killed elsewhere and dumped where she was found. It was unknown whether she had tried to hail a cab or had just decided to walk several blocks to her place. Had she encountered a dangerous cab driver? Was she stalked by an obsessed fan? Or was she a random victim? Was it just the wrong place at the wrong time for a young woman to be alone in a sketchy neighborhood? Mia expressed how she felt unsafe in Seattle, but had also traveled those same streets many nights alone while living in the city. A memorial service was held in Seattle, followed by a get-together at a bar that had been a frequent hangout for Mia and the band. Friends and fans arrived carrying yellow roses, Mia's favorite flower. They spent the afternoon crying, laughing, and remembering their friend. Mia was interred in a cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky, where she grew up. The Gits album, titled Entering the Conquering Chicken, was released in 1994 on the label Broken Records. More blues influences were incorporated into the album and highlighted in the song A Change Is Gonna Come, a ballad made famous by soul singer Sam Cooke. Cooke also, eerily, died as a victim of homicide. He was shot and killed in a motel in 1964 under mysterious circumstances. In June of 1994, 7 Year Bitch released an album titled Viva Zapata as a tribute to Mia and their late guitarist Stephanie. Viva Zapata was a phrase Mia often used to honor her famous great-great-great-grandfather. Also in 1994, rock musician Joan Jett wrote and recorded a song titled Go Home, dedicated to Mia. It was released on her band The Blackhearts' album Pure and Simple. The video for the song shows a woman being followed onto a subway train and fighting off an attacker. Jett wanted to raise awareness of the dangers women faced. To acknowledge Mia's tragic death as the inspiration for the song and the video, Jett included a dedication to Mia at the end of the video. However, MTV Music Television refused to air the dedication for some reason. The remaining members of the Gits contacted Jett after seeing the video. They'd met briefly in the past and wanted to thank her. Jett and the Gits decided to collaborate on a project, with Jett singing lead vocals on a live recording. The collaboration album was released in 1995 under the band name Evil Stig, or Gits Live spelled backwards. Mia's murder led to a movement beginning in Seattle and spearheaded by Valerie Agnew from 7 Year Bitch. She founded an organization with other musicians called Home Alive, an anti-violence and self-defense organization dedicated to keeping women safe. Benefit concerts and collaboration albums brought in funds to provide women with low-cost self-defense classes, counseling, and other support services. In 1995, a benefit album, Home Alive, The Art of Self-Defense, was released featuring tracks by Jello Biafra of the Dead Kennedys, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Ann and Nancy Wilson, Pearl Jam, 7 Year Bitch, and the Gits. Over 1,000 investigative hours and tens of thousands of dollars had been spent in the search for Mia's killer. A decade passed with no leads. Then in 2003, DNA from bite marks found on Mia's body would identify the murderer. DNA had been extracted from saliva left in bite marks found on the body. It had been kept in cold storage since 1993. The DNA was first tested in 2001, but yielded no suspects. In 2003, a DNA profile from a Florida case was entered into CODIS, or the Combined DNA Index System, the United States National DNA Database maintained by the FBI. It was found to be a match with the DNA collected in the Mia Zapata murder case. The suspect, Jesus Mesquia, lived in Florida and worked as a fisherman. He had a history of violence against women, including domestic abuse and assault and battery. In the 1980s, he was arrested in Florida for kidnapping, false imprisonment, robbery, and indecent exposure. In the late 80s and early 90s, he had violations in California for spousal battery and assault to commit rape. And in 1997, he was charged with aggravated battery against a pregnant woman. Investigators determined that Mesquia had resided in Seattle between 1992 and 1994 and lived a mile and a half from where Mia's body was found. They further determined that his live-in girlfriend at the time was out of town the night the crime occurred. He'd also been charged with indecent exposure within 2 weeks of Mia's murder. Soon after Mia was killed, Mezquia left Seattle for Southern California before returning to Florida. On January 10, 2003, Jesus Mezquia was arrested by Seattle police. He pled not guilty. The prosecutor stated that Mia had no known previous association with Mezquia and was the victim of a random attack. They theorized that Mezquia had witnessed Mia leaving her friend's place in the early morning hours and followed her. She'd been wearing headphones over her ears and probably didn't hear her attacker approach until it was too late. He dragged her into his car, where he assaulted her before dumping her body on the street. In March 2004, Mezquia was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 36 years in prison. He died in 2021 after serving 18 years. It was reported that he died of an undisclosed illness, but Mia's friend and bandmate Steve Moriarty has said that his death was the result of COVID-19. When asked by Rolling Stone how he felt upon learning his friend's killer was dead, Moriarty stated, "I was thinking for years how I would react when he was released. He affected a lot of people in a very negative way for many years. Good riddance," he concluded. Mia's legacy is still alive today. In 2005, a documentary film was released. Titled The Gits Movie, it details Mia's life, the history of the Gits, and the Seattle music scene. In 2008, a final cut of the film was released in 20 North American cities on July 7th, the 15th anniversary of her death. In 2023, her alma mater, Antioch College, opened an exhibition showcasing Mia Zapata's accomplishments as an artist, writer, and musician. It was the first time many of her art pieces were publicly shown, including several paintings, prints, and sculptures. Gits memorabilia and photos were also on display. Mia's parents, Richard and Donna Zapata, attended the opening, as did bandmate Matt Dresner. Dresner and Steve Moriarty helped the show's curator, Michael Caselli, a former classmate and friend, get in touch with the Zapatas, who lent him many of the paintings that made up the exhibition, including the portrait of the Zapata brothers. Valerie Agnew, the former drummer of 7 Year Bitch, said this of her friend, quote, "She was like nobody I've ever met before. She was so sincere. She was a huge influence on me and everybody in my band." Richard Zapata, Mia's father, said, "She absorbed emotion from the people who confided in her. Her gift was to draw on the pain or joy that others were experiencing and convert it into poems and songs." And Joan Jett had this to say about Mia Zapata. "Her legacy should be beautiful, strong punk rock music coming from a woman's perspective, because that's who she was." Listeners often ask me if the cases I cover bother me to the point of sleepless nights or dark thoughts. The answer is that the cases don't stay with me, but the people I learn about do. I sometimes spend weeks gathering research, reading, and taking notes about each case. And that's before I even start writing and recording the script to create each episode. After so much time immersed in the lives of every person I cover, I feel like I get to know them a bit, living with them, at least in my head, for a little while. After learning about Mia's life from the stories and memories shared by her friends, family, and fans, I found myself asking the question, who would Mia have become if she lived beyond the age of 27? If you read, watch, or listen to anything about Mia's life, you'll learn about her murder. You'll also hear that she was just about to reach success with a record deal and a European tour already in the works. She and the band probably would have realized their goals and perhaps even become music superstars. This makes me wonder, though, would she have been happy if she had reached the top? Would she have wanted the recognition someone like Janis Joplin or Kurt Cobain achieved? Mia was all about the music. She put her heart and soul into it, but it took a toll on her. She struggled with deep emotions, bringing her song lyrics and soulful singing to another level. But these emotions also affected her to the point of pain at times. Pain she numbed with alcohol when she couldn't cope with these feelings. Stardom would have tested her, I think, the way it tests so many young artists. Mia was unique in that from an early age, she didn't care what people thought about her looks or how she dressed, but craved the freedom to express herself in any way she chose. Would she have had the same freedom after signing with the major label? Or would they have tried to mold the band into what they thought would sell more records? And if so, how would Mia have responded to this? Would she have become a success only to discover that she was happiest when she said to her friend the last time they spoke, "It was just the four of us, on the road, playing music for our fans"? When we remember Mia Zapata, we mourn the loss of such a beautiful soul. But maybe it will help a little if we also remembered the joy she experienced from doing what she loved while she was alive. Mia shared that joy with her fans when she performed. She still brings her light and energy to those who discover her music decades later and have the pleasure of hearing her sing for the very first time. That will do it for this episode of Once Upon a Crime. An episode will not be released next Monday, but since it's Halloween week, I'll release an episode to celebrate my favorite holiday. That spooky true crime story will be released right here on All Hallows Eve. How'd you like to join me for a Halloween party? Costume's optional. I'll be recording a Halloween special in costume with my friends Megan and Neil from Mortal Musings podcast. We're going to share some creepy true crime/horror stories and play a trivia game, and we may also have some additional surprises in store. And it'll all be captured on video. You must be a Patreon member to get that special video episode, which will surely be a laugh riot. Everyone at the $5 membership tier and above can access our Halloween special. You can find out more and join today at patreon.com/onceuponacrime. Once Upon a Crime is written and produced by me, Esther Sanchez-Ledlow. My executive producer is Lorena Garcia, and my researcher is Emma Battaglia. To watch videos of each of our episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll find it under Once Upon a Crime Podcast. There's a link in the show notes. Until next time, be good to one another.